Welcome to the motherfucking we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. It appears that Spain's own Tania Alvarez, EBU champion, will be defending her EBU title late next month against France's own Odilia Ben Ephraim. In the women's super bantamweight division, super bantamweight, that's where Ellie Scotney reigns as a unified champion. That's where Mexico's own Yemi Mercado holds the WBC, and Argentina's own Nazarena Romero holds the WBA. That is where this contest is taking place, where Tania Alvarez will be defending her EBU title, sporting a professional record of 11 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 2 knockouts. Having never been knocked out in 12 professional bouts, you might be familiar with Tania, as she did fight Skye Nicholson at featherweight a ways back. Lost a somewhat lopsided decision, lopsided on the cards, but she did make Skye Nicholson work. She became EBU champion, picked up the vacant EBU title in her last fight against Maria Secchi earlier this year, and now she will be defending it against Odilia Ben Ephraim, who sports professional record of 5 wins with 3 losses, no draws, no recorded knockouts, having never been knocked out in 8 professional bouts. Last in action in June of this year, opposite the ring, Naramain Birchie. Odilia lost a majority decision in what was an 8-rounder. She's coming off a loss ahead of this fight, where Tania is coming off a string of victories since having dropped that decision to Skye Nicholson at featherweight in February of last year. She's won 4 in a row, 4 fights. Last in action earlier this year against Maria Secchi for what was the vacant EBU title, which I mentioned. Tania Alvarez, if you haven't seen her, she's a very crude, very raw, rough around the edges pressure fighter. No bells and whistles. Low-level pressure fighters are basically brawlers and maulers. It's very much the look of Tania Alvarez, who is 22 years old, her whole career ahead of her, plenty of time to improve, though still a bit difficult to imagine how that's going to happen when she's based out of Spain, fighting primarily in Spain, and without exposure to what lies abroad. When you see a world champion like a Mizuki Hiruta, for example, who travels to America for her training camps, so does Ramla Ali, to round themselves out as fighters. It is a little hard to imagine how Tania will be able to take it up a notch when so much about her career is insulated, training primarily in Spain, fighting out of Spain. She does seem to have a good thing going there. Some modeling gigs, photo shoots. With some money behind her, they are able to regularly do fights for her in her native Spain. She is able to keep a regular schedule of fights for a fighter that isn't with a major promotional outfit. 3 of the 4 fights that she had last year were in her own neck of the woods. The one she had this year. That one too. And the fight that she's about to have, which gives you the sense that so long as she stays in her native Spain, she can stay in the winner's bracket. But in order to improve and become world class, additions need to be made. The super bantamweight division is a densely populated division, a talent-rich division. It's not just the world champions, but the up-and-comers too, the fighters that are coming through. There's a lot of good fighters at 122. As it pertains to this fight, I give Tania Alvarez the edge. I give Tania Alvarez the edge to win this fight, perhaps by way of a points decision, if for no other reason than she has home field advantage. She's a prolific fighter, a busy puncher. And Odilia, the girl that she's going to be fighting, she's already lost 3 fights before. What's one more? Between Tania Alvarez's work rate, the fact that she's going to have home field advantage, and that in many ways Odilia is a journeywoman, Tania Alvarez, by way of a points decision, is the way to go. But when are things going to get serious again? When is Tania going to step up? Your guess is as good as mine. She has a lot of time because she's only 22. It's the upside that she doesn't necessarily need to rush. She does have time to have more fights like this one, garner more experience, bank more rounds, though it's an eventuality that if you want to get to world level, additions need to be made, additional experiences need to be had. I like her chances in this fight, though. I like her chances in this fight set to go down late next month. Tania Alvarez on points is the pick. In men's light heavyweight news, Eddie Hearn on the status of the Artur Beterbiev versus Dimitri Bivol rematch. His Excellency has told us the rematch is on. We wait for the final confirmation. That's good news. This fight between Artur and Dimitri had a lot of people talking, some who agreed with the outcome and some who didn't, but it's all good for the sport and it's all good for the fighters and their profiles. Dmitry Bivol and Artur Beterbiev jointly became champions way back there in 2017, and for large spells, large portions of their reigns as champions, they flew under the radar, the both of them, so that if they have finally got the boxing community at large's attention with their own fight, they need to build on that, they need to capitalize on that. We don't want a long gap in between the first fight and the rematch. You strike while the iron is hot. I say it all the time, to keep the momentum going, the energy going, the interest going. There was something last week about Bob Arum saying that there might be fights in the interim, that Artur Beterbiev may not see Dmitry Bivol again until late next year, and that he might fight someone else, presumably his IBF mandatory, Michael Eifert, a fight that was ordered by the IBF, which I think can all be situated with Michael Eifert's cooperation. Pay that guy to step aside and let the big boys do the dance one more time. Whoever wins, you get the winner. If it's about activity, get Michael Eifert a slot on the prelim card. Shouldn't be out of the question. If Turkey could let Filip Hrgovic fight Mark Demori of all people on the undercard of one of those Riyadh season shows, then surely he can find Michael Eifert, a keep busy kind of guy, in a keep busy kind of fight. Get him Malik Zanad, the guy that Dmitry Bivol beat up. If it's about activity for Michael Eifert and wanting to stay active while he waits for his title shot, that there's nothing going on here that can't be worked around. The IBF allowed Jermel Charlo to negotiate several step-aside deals with Bakram Murtazaliev so that he could unify his division. I don't see why they can't give these guys that same consideration. It can be worked around. It should. Now, this is different from what Bob Arum had to say, what Eddie Hearn is now saying, that the rematch is a go, it's going to happen. Bob gave us the impression that it wouldn't, not right away.
There's a video come out, obviously, you and Turki Al-Sheikh, and Turki's talking about February 22nd being a big card. Bob Arum saying anything outside of Riyadh seems to be there's going to be normal boxing.
What the fuck is Bob Arum, though?
What, I was going to ask you that.
What on earth is he talking about? I mean, where is Bob Arum getting his information? Not from the source, which is Turki Al-Sheikh. Riyadh season Los Angeles was incredibly successful, right? People talk about, it lost money. Yeah, it was sponsored. It was a commercial project, a brand project for Riyadh season. There was one of the best fight cards I've ever seen in America. The stadium was packed. Eminem was performing. It was amazing. And then in London, they broke all the records, 98,000 or whatever it was, for Joshua against Dubois. Of course, Riyadh season is in Riyadh. But every now and again, I'm sure His Excellency will want to do an international event. And guess what? It's got nothing to do with Bob Arum. It's completely up to His Excellency and Saudi Arabia what they do. The fact that they delivered us an LA event and a London event, we should be extremely thankful. And of course the focus is Riyadh. But Bob Arum is certainly not qualified to speak on behalf of Saudi Arabia and His Excellency about their plans for Riyadh season, because he has no involvement in it. And it's rubbish that he's spouting.
It all ties together because the air of doubt that Beterbiev versus Bivol 2 had casted over it came from Bob. He's the one who said it might not happen next. As I recall, immediately after the fight, Turki Al-Sheikh's reaction was he wants to do a rematch, and if the fighters want to do a rematch, then there's gonna be a rematch. Bob's the one who came in out of left field. Now, I don't know what Bob Arum's level of involvement in Riyadh season shows really is. I mean, it seems that Turkey is primarily working with Frank and Eddie. Mostly. The stuff about Artur and Dmitry taking fights in the interim, the stuff about fighters wanting to be overpaid have to fight in either Saudi or the UK because they don't want to do shows in America. All that stuff came from Bob. What seemed like good intel at first, until Eddie Hearn said this. What seemed like good intel until Turkey himself addressed it via his social media, saying, "Who said I will not do another event in the United States anymore? Make sure to take the announcements from me only." Confusion. Confusion created by Bob Arum's statements about Bivol versus Beterbiev, about the future of Riyadh season shows in America. Confusion that has now been dispelled. The facts. A long time ago, Bob Arum poured cold water on the prospect of a Beterbiev versus Bivol fight because in his opinion, he thought that Dmitry Bivol was boring and the fight had no pizzazz. This was before Dimitri beat Canelo.
I bring it up all the time.
And yet you still have people running around claiming that Dimitri was trying to age out Artur Beterbiev, wait for him to get older, wait for him to lose a step, when these comments were public.
Bob was holding up the fight.
He didn't want to do it, which doesn't surprise me because at that time, he didn't want nothing to do with Matchroom. He didn't want nothing to do with Matchroom fighters and Eddie Hearn. So that a few years later, after their initial meeting takes place and he starts talking about the rematch might not happen, it just feels like more of the same. Once again, Bob is pouring cold water on the fight.
History is repeating itself.
For Dimitri Bivol, for Artur Beterbiev, for Artur especially, given his age, there is no other fight more sensible and sensical than this, that if these two fighters are to at some point meet each other again, time is of the essence, especially for Artur, because he's pushing 40. You don't want months and months and months to go by, especially with an injury-prone fighter like him, before he meets Dimitri for a second time.
The division needs this rematch. No fight at 175 has captivated an audience in recent memory more than this one. I would go as far as saying that this was many times bigger than Ward versus Kovalev, 1 and 2.
It was bigger in terms of finance and scale, the stage at which they fought on, significance, that this wasn't just for 3 belts, this was for undisputed. This was the first undisputed champion crowned in the light heavyweight division since Roy Jones Jr. It's been that long.
You don't hold this up for fights in the interim. You don't hold this up for a Michael Eifert fight.
So you have to wonder, where is it that Bob got this from? Or was this just his effort to slow things down? That maybe what he wants is for Artur to take this victory and run. You won the first fight, you're undisputed, you don't need to fight him again. Is that his mentality? Is that how he looks at all of this? Because for a fighter Artur's age, who's flown largely under the radar for many, many years, he's finally got the chance to fight in a big fight and make big money.
He needs this.
Shouldn't put it off. And by all accounts, it doesn't look like they're going to. It looks like the rematch will happen. And I'm happy to hear it.
In a timely fashion.
Too much of what happens in boxing, or what needs to, gets left in the crock pot. When we ain't got all day, the fighters ain't got all year. You need to move on some of this stuff.
Men's heavyweight news. On the heels of his first professional loss, Frazier Clarke says no problem, concern, or investigation surrounding gloves worn by Fabio Wortley, the opposite of what Ben Shalom communicated at the start of this week. I touched my glove, and I touched his. He was touching mine, and I said, mine are pillows compared to his gloves. His gloves are very, very thin, let's say, and unpadded, but he's got to land them on me. That one set of gloves can feel thinner than another, might appear a cause for concern, not so according to the BBBoC's Dennis Gilmartin, who has tightened the rules to ensure that all gloves used on BBBoC-regulated events meet strict standards. Those procedures have since been adopted by the European Boxing Union, the EBU. The design of all gloves worn in fights commissioned by the BBBoC must be vetted long before they're used in a fight. Gloves are checked extensively before they're approved. It's a laborious process, and it doesn't happen quickly, he told Boxing Scene before going on to explain that each glove will be weighed by the gram to ensure it doesn't weigh less than the legislated weight before the glove is dissected to ensure that alien materials are not used. They're then extensively trialed by licensed boxers, licensed gyms. In short, it is perfectly normal for certain gloves to feel different to others. Some will have more man-made padding than those with a higher concentration of horsehair, for example. First and foremost, they have to weigh a minimum amount, Gilmartin said. So the weights are all the same, but if certain gloves are heavily loaded around the back of the hand and the wrist, and therefore have less padding around the knuckles, we won't approve them. But yes, there are gloves that are known as puncher's gloves. There are gloves that will have extra padding to protect those who suffer from hand injuries. No two pairs are going to be exactly the same. Gilmartin went on to explain that the Everlast gloves worn by Clarke are mass-produced compared to the fly gloves worn by Wortley in both fights. which are handmade to the specific dimensions of a fighter's hands. Naturally, they will feel different. All approved gloves are listed on the BBBoC website. We have removed certain gloves over the years from the approved list, Gilmartin said. He stressed that in such cases, the issue with those gloves was identified by the BBBoC and never because a boxer or trainer had objected to them. Injury is not caused by a glove, he said, but by the person wearing the glove. We have seen similar injuries caused, and it's not just heavyweights, it's in the lower weights too. There is no pattern in the make of the gloves. The pattern is with the accuracy and weight of the punches. The gloves are inspected before the fight to ensure they are consistent with the approved design. All parties will check the gloves to ensure everyone is happy to proceed. On this occasion, the inspector overseeing the process and checking the gloves alongside the boxers and their teams was the head of the BBBoC, Robert Smith. Nothing wrong with the gloves. I did the gloves meeting, Smith told Boxing Scene via text message on Wednesday. There was no objection to the gloves before the fight. These are all very bad optics for Ben Shalom, who's the one who got the ball rolling, claiming there was going to be an investigation.
Something with the gloves, he's not supposed to hit that hard. It's not supposed to do that much damage.
If what you're implying is that there was anything wrong, any kind of funny business, somebody has to be at fault. Whether it's Fabio Wortley for glove tampering, or the manufacturer of the gloves for defective equipment, or Robert Smith himself who conducted the inspection. That there's no way it works out to where you make an implication like that, subtle or otherwise.
And somebody isn't to blame.
There's no such thing as a free lunch. Everything costs something, including an insinuation like the one that Ben Shalom made.
Though as quickly as he made it, that's as quick as they started scaling that back, walking that back.
Not just Ben Shalom, but Frazier Clarke himself. That if what all of this was an effort to save face for Frazier Clarke, you made it worse.
Ben just doesn't know what he's doing.
In a very general sense, why would you think you could say something like that and Frank Warren was going to take it lying down? He didn't take Chris Eubank Jr.'s libelous accusations lying down, so why would he take yours lying down?
Frazier Clarke has suffered his first professional loss. Lawrence Okolie has jumped ship. He's left boxer for Queensbury.
Ben's reputation is in the crapper, to the point to where you have to start to wonder if Sky Sports will even stay in boxing if their only stake is what Ben Shalom can put together for them. It's been approximately 3 years since Boxer attempted to fill the void left behind by Matchroom's departure from the platform in 2021, inking that 4-year deal that is fast approaching its term limit. The life of the deal is almost over, and based on everything that's going on as of late, you have to wonder if Sky will even renew.
The strength of the cards, the strength of the stable, and the prospects for the future. What can Ben Shalom provide Sky with that they should give him a new deal? And if they don't, what happens?
To what fighters they have under contract and what fighters they don't. Where will they go?
It's not looking good.
Put simply, the market might be too competitive for a new kid on the block like Ben Shalom, who just doesn't have the chops for this.
He's not cut out for it.
It's a boys' club. It's definitely a boys' club. And Frank and Eddie are not making it easy for him, but they're not supposed to.
Supposed to earn his seat at the table.